Hi, everyone. My name is Beau Lechanger. I'm a senior consultant with the Migration Build team.
Hi, this is Christine Scrency. I'm also a senior consultant with the Migration Build team. We're here today to talk about the mobilize phase of a customer's journey. Really quickly, we've got an agenda, lots of fun things in store today. We're going to talk about the mobilize phase and where that sits in the overall customer journey. We'll also talk about how you can prepare your organization to innovate. You may be facing a migration. As a part of that migration, you may be looking at ways to modernize or innovate your organization. So we'll talk about that. Beau and I will share some customer success stories and also do some demo, and then we'll wrap up. Excited to be here with you today. All righty, I'll hand it over to Beau to talk about the mobilize phase.
Yeah, so one of the things with the customer journeys as it relates to bringing applications over to AWS is a lot of times customers don't even know where to begin. So we've been able to break it down into 3 phases, and it really starts with the assess phase, where we're working with customers, doing their readiness assessment, identifying gaps, and it shifts into mobilize, where we're taking that data and working with customers, and helping them prepare for migrating and modernizing their applications as well. And that's where we're going to cover really is the mobilize phase, really drilling down into the key areas there. One of the big things, one of my first mobilize phases, helping a customer out with their journey was with a large university where they were a greenfield customer coming over to AWS. So we were able to work with them, get their applications over to AWS, and at the same time provide that education aspect as it related to areas like security and helping them out with their operations model. Christine, you also have ran several mobilize phases as well. Do you have an anecdote that you want to share as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked with a variety of customers across different verticals, both in the public sector and commercial sector, as I know you have as well, Beau. So today I'll try to pepper in some stories about a large defense contractor that we worked with throughout the mobilize phase. That company was really looking to shift more of a product-centric model. And throughout the presentation, we can share tidbits about that journey and specifically how we address the 4 different accelerators. In the mobilize slide, we talk about portfolio, migrate, people, and platform as really the 4 foundational sort of pillars to the mobilize phase. So we'll add some stories around that. All righty. Beau, actually, that's a good lead in to you talking about expected outcomes of some of the accelerators.
Yeah, absolutely. So as you can see, there's multiple accelerators that are involved in the customer journey coming over to AWS. And I'll try to break down each one to give more visibility as it kind of paints the larger picture of what we're trying to do. So one of the interesting accelerators is the portfolio accelerator. It's a very adaptable model and flexible that kind of fits really with customers and what they're trying to do. So with portfolio, we're really working alongside the customer, performing a discovery of what applications sit in their environment right now, trying to align, business requirements, what are good use cases for applications that would be an ideal fit to first move over to AWS. We're recognizing things such as dependency mapping, port protocols, everything. And in this accelerator as well, we're really identifying that wave plan for the migration, which subset of apps can be moved at various times as well. And this also helps shift into the platform accelerator, where we start talking about landing zone security and operations, landing zone where we're establishing that multi-account architecture across a landing zone, if you will, establishing a networking model, getting our platform in place for where customers then feel they are operationally ready to start bringing applications onto AWS. We're solidifying that model to gain confidence to where we feel as a customer we're ready to move into AWS. We're also talking about security controls as well, ranging from detective and detective controls, preventative controls, solidifying centralized logging, monitoring as well, all the way from OSI layer security, and even going into operations where we're working, off the ITIL framework, talking about change event management, patching, tagging strategies, things like that, just kind of going through the whole gamut. That way, once we've solidified those decisions, implemented into an environment, then we can then proceed into the migration accelerator, where we're utilizing those applications, or rather the applications that we've targeted in our wave strategy, and starting to bring them over and trying to understand like which migration strategy are we going to use. Are we doing a lift and shift rehost? Are we kind of doing a hybrid model where we're bringing them over to AWS first and then doing a re-platform or re-architecture? That's where the migration accelerator comes into place. Christine, is there anything you want to add as it relates to the People Mobilize accelerators?
Absolutely. So with the 3 accelerators that Bo just talked about, discovering, making sure the platform's there, and moving workloads, it all represents change for our customers. And you may be in these shoes right now thinking, gosh, that is a lot to do to get my organization ready to move to the cloud. And what am I going to do? How am I going to get people ready for that? Certainly, people are one of the most important resources in our organizations. So in the People Accelerator, we really focus on what it takes to be ready to make a move. So whether it's doing a learning needs analysis to understand where the teams may have some skill gaps, and also maybe looking at those skill gaps and identifying training plans to help teams get ready. Certainly, there are specific skills that are needed to make a migration possible, but there are also skills that are needed to just simply operate in the cloud and also take advantage of the cloud. So training your team is a really important aspect of this. And often that training and the dedicated time to do that training is going to come from the top of an organization, where a leadership or the leaders of the organization can say, hey, this is important, and we're going to make sure you employees have dedicated time to do training to get up to speed, and also to explore new technologies. The cloud has awesome benefits of scale and cost savings, and certainly an organization needs to train their folks to take advantage of those benefits. So the People Accelerator, and we'll talk about it more here in upcoming slides, really helps customers with that focus. The last one that you see on the right-hand side of the slide is the Mobilize Accelerator. And so we'll talk about this more later on when we demo and talk about different mechanisms. But the Mobilize Accelerator is really the foundational elements that all of the other work streams that you see here leverage. So what does that mean? It means that we want to focus during the mobilize phase. We want to focus on agile operations. If you're not already experimenting with operating in an agile manner, this is the time to do it. And there are different mechanisms that can help us do that, like a knowledge base and governance mechanisms that make life easier, especially in our remote world. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. And now we're going to look at the timeline for how do all of these things fit together. Well,
yeah, so this is the roadmap and timeline, and as you can see here, we give a respective map of a 1-week cadence. Broken down by sprint for each accelerator. And one call out, Christine, as well, that you kind of went over is that we'll demo later on in our delivery kits what this looks like at a lower level. But from a high overview, again, I want to really drive the point is that these accelerators really operate in parallel with one another. And oftentimes, as we've seen talking about the platform accelerator, you have individual work streams as it relates to security and like landing zone as an example, where they kind of become intertwined and dependent on one another, right? And these accelerators kind of in some ways interact one another as well, but operate in their own independent stream as well. So one of the big things, again, as I mentioned, is going going back to the portfolio accelerator, it has its own order, if you will, of, as we look respectively at that, looking at the discovery party where, we're working hands-on, as a customer, you're, using some type of device to really drill down into your environment, perform a discovery, see which applications you're working with. Then at that point, doing analysis of what data you're working with, identifying the applications that you're bringing over. And really, again, as we look at each accelerator, you're able to tie in your own events, like, with the platform build out, you're doing, all the way starting from, doing design sessions, trying to identify what your current model is, what is your target state of what, gets you to that confidence of being operationally ready. And then you're doing that platform build out and validation before we start working at that sprint 5 critical week, where essentially you're locking everybody in that room. You're getting network engineers, application owners, everybody locked in to where you're able to get all the change management protocol events in place, identify network firewalls that need to be open, backups scheduled, everything before we start shifting into the migration phase. But that's it for this slide. Christine, do you have anything you want to add before we continue on?
The only thing I'll say is you may be looking at this and thinking, that's a lot to do all at once. And if you're thinking that, you're right. A move to the cloud does involve lots of hands-on work, and it may be parallel work like we're showing on the slide here. And so the next topic that I'll get into is how we organize for innovation. And so Bo and I can talk at length about, working with customers and helping them prepare for this journey. And a lot of times the ideas that we're sourcing aren't cloud specific. We don't talk about AWS only ideas. The things that we end up talking about are actually the things that are in the books that you see on the screen. If you've read any of these books, you're becoming familiar with lean product development and some of the leading thinking around lean product development. So when we look at our cloud journey and the slide Bo just went through where it's lots of things happening in parallel, we can leverage the ideas from these books and the case studies to help us get the work done and stay organized about doing our work, and also ensure that our employees and our talent stay with us and that they're happy. So later on during demo, we'll show you what this looks like in action, but we just wanted to share that, the mobilize phase is the time to give your team a safe place to learn. Allow them to experiment things like with small agile teams. So in AWS, we call these 2 pizza teams. If you read the books on the screen, you'll know that Amazon is talked about as a case study in some of these books. And 2 pizza teams are just one of the ideas that are worth experimenting with. Earlier, I talked about the customer I worked with that wanted to devise more product-centric teams, and they did it. They were successful. And what it took was identifying key players to make up these 2 pizza teams, where they had people from the technology development side of the house, but they also had business and finance people on those 2 pizza teams. So each 2 pizza team could focus on their product development pretty much end to end, and they could be autonomous about it and make decisions and do experiments to prove out ideas. And so just wanted to share this as an idea, and also encourage you to think about experimenting with some of these ideas if you're not already using them, because the mobilize phase is the time to test these things out before you're headed into a migration where you may be focused on velocity and meeting a deadline, for example, to try to get out of a data center. Another mechanism, of course, is also one-way and two-way doors. We often think about one-way and two-way door decisions. So one-way door, it's hard to reverse a one-way door decision. It may take a lot of time or resources or cost to reverse a one-way door decision. Many decisions that we have to make about our move to the cloud are two-way door decisions, meaning it doesn't take a lot of time or cost or resources to change that decision once it's been made. So when you're thinking about organizing for innovation, keep these ideas top of mind. And also remember, these are cloud agnostic ideas, meaning they aren't AWS specific. You could use the idea of one-way door, two-door decisions across your organization. It's not even an IT specific idea. So that's a little bit about that. And now we'll talk about some customer outcomes that we've both experienced.
Yeah, so one of the big things, Christine, I've been helping customers along their journey with mobilized spaces for a few years now. So one of the general things to call out really is that as we look at the outcomes that we have presented here, you have your own story, your own outcomes, and I have my own. But one of the things I've always learned is that not all organizations are all built the same. Each one has its own blockers, and as they kind of go along these mobilized phases, they're going to get different outcomes, right? They have different blockers, different strength points, and that's fine. That's what makes the mobilized phase an interesting phase and very flexible framework, is that it helps address the gaps, if you will. When we worked with a large university a few years ago, it was a greenfield customer coming over to AWS. We worked with a team of about a dozen people. So kind of what you were talking about, Christine, earlier about those two pizza sized teams, it was a great experience because they had that lean operating model that we were looking for. And that's typically, the most efficient model that I've come across with customers. And, in that time, we really got them trained up, getting them immersed into AWS more. We launched Control Tower. We were able to launch about a dozen account environment with them. They had an interesting state requirement of getting Active Directory integrated with Office 365. And from there, we were able to, once they had that confidence of moving forward, being able to get five pilot applications migrated over to AWS. And it wasn't all lift and shift either. They had some container-based applications. They needed to do some replatforming as well, going from certain database engines and translating that to, RDS Aurora. So that was something that we were able to do, and they were able to go from being greenfield, where only there was sparse experience within the team, to where they were able to operate comfortably after working with them for 4 months. And Christine, I know you have a lot of experience working with customers on their journeys as well. So if you want to share your anecdote as well, that'd be very useful.
Yeah. I'll carry the thread that I started on a previous slide about the customer that wanted to develop product-centric teams. So that was this defense contractor you see here on the slide. That customer needed to exit 2 data centers. They wanted to avoid lease renewal. And often a lot of the customer scenarios that we come across are customers finding themselves in those shoes of, hey, we want to avoid, capital expenditure of having to renew our data center lease. So let's try to exit some data centers and save some expense there. So this customer in particular was rather large. By the time we were fully engaged with this customer, there were 250 people or more participating in the project. So it was big, and I think this is a good juxtaposition of an example of university, right? Just to show you that customers of all shapes and sizes go through this mobilized phase of the journey, and like Bo said, it's not one size fits all, and that's okay. So this customer that I worked with, we did a Control Tower implementation across 2 different environments. And we also helped them develop their Cloud Center of Excellence. Since this customer was looking at a data center exit and they were really focused on those 2 pizza teams, even after the mobilized engagement, they were really focused on increasing their velocity. They had 5 additional data centers that they wanted to close within a certain amount of time. So they focused on the automation around their migration practices. And just recently, I chatted with them again, and it was around December, I believe, or January. They were migrating at a rate of 67 servers a day. So they're constantly trying to increase their velocity and get out of the data centers. And they've been really successful at doing that. And it was based on what they learned and what they experimented with during the mobilized phase. So, Though and our colleagues and myself, we've been helping lots of customers migrate across a variety of industries and sectors, and we've pretty much settled on a few critical components that are needed to be successful in the move to the cloud. So we'll talk about those a little bit here, and just to add a disclaimer before we even start talking about these ideas is, it's okay. If it turns out that you're missing one of these items, does it mean, the move to the cloud isn't going to be successful? Not at all. It may mean that it may need a revisit. So for example, if we're not training builders, if that's a gap for you, it doesn't mean the move to the cloud isn't going to be successful. It means that we need to place some time and energy attention on that to ensure long-term success. Because moving to the cloud, a migration may be a short-term event, and you may get through that and your builders may be fine. But we want to make sure that we're training those builders for the long term, for example. So just wanted to share that idea before we talk about these in more depth, that if one thing from this list is missing and you don't have it, it's okay. Let's go ahead and spend some time and attention on the pieces that may be missing. One of the things that is really critical for success is setting top-down aggressive goals. This may start with an executive sponsor, or it may even start with a board or a set of investors. But these top-down aggressive goals are often, one of the best starting points because they allow an organization and a team to work backwards. If you're familiar with Amazon and the way that we work, we often do working backwards as one of our first exercises. And all that is looking at what goal has been set. What's the goal? What's the time frame? Let's work backwards from that goal and identify the steps and milestones that we need to get there. So starting with those top-down aggressive goals, if those are coming from an executive sponsor who is aligned with the move to the cloud, all the better. Like we've talked about with the builders a minute ago, people are a critical success factor, and it's that executive sponsorship that is going to, train those builders and also dedicate their time. Many of the customers that we work with are operating production systems and managing a migration. They have a lot on their plate. And so it takes that executive sponsor, it takes their power and influence to make sure that those folks that are on the ground have the time to dedicate to a move to the cloud, as well as the time to dedicate to train, to understand all the skills that they need to build and also operate in the cloud. So that executive sponsorship is really critical. And then finally, agile methodology and tools. So agile methodology and tools not only help us when it comes to, moving quickly and maybe meeting timelines when it comes to, a data center exit or something like that, but they also help us manage data and one-way and two-way door decisions. They're really critical to avoiding analysis paralysis. So just something to think about as you plan your move to the cloud. These tools also are going to allow you to implement governance, but also share knowledge across your organization, which is really critical when you're making a change. That knowledge sharing is an important element to have across your organization.
Yeah, so one of the things I want to bring up too is, as we start bridging all these accelerators together, Christine, as you've noticed, I kind of go back to that map that we had where it just seemed like there's a lot of work involved, and there is, but at the same time, we need to be able to track that work. In our delivery kits, we've broken it down by work stream and accelerators, right? So we have the stories and epics that are set up to help, identify the tasks that are needed to get done to reach these decisions and implement the artifacts that we need to kind of essentially complete what we're trying to do. And in there it maps to the activity plans that we'll go over in the platform migration delivery kit as well. And we've also published runbooks within the respective delivery kits as well. So for example, as you can see in the slide here, we have a run book where it's part of our security delivery kit, where we talk about unused privilege detection procedure, where we give a template, if you will, of what we've seen, a uniform process that we've seen from other customers, and are able to take these anecdotes and really just throw it in a technical documentation that best aligns to most environments. And from there, customers, based on what their organization needs, can tweak, here and there to what suits them. And that's really something critical to point out there. And also at the same time too, we do have artifacts that will kind kind of segue into a little bit as well as we start talking about the various technical areas that need to be addressed in a mobilized phase. Christine, back over to you.
Excellent. So we're going to flip over to demo some of the things that we've been talking about. Excellent. So now we're going to roll into a demo and share live with you some of the things that we've been talking about. What you see on your screen is our set of delivery kits. I'm going to go ahead and expand as I'm talking so you can see the depth and breadth of the delivery kits. It amounts to be over 250 pages of wiki content. And if you were to print it out in PDF, it's 500 some pages. We also have Jira backlogs that go along with this set of content. Like we've been mentioning, it's really important to keep track of activity tracking as well as knowledge base, really critical mechanisms that we need to use during this mobilized phase. We'll go ahead and share with you one of our activity plans. So like we mentioned before, there are 4 different pillars or 4 different accelerators associated with the mobilized phase. 2 of them are platform and migration, and they're really interrelated. The platform needs to be ready to receive the incoming migrations. And so Bo is going to take us through this activity plan. And before he does that, I just wanted to share the overarching view that this is platform and migration. And we have activity plans also for portfolio and people and our other pieces of the delivery kits. We're just focusing on this one today. Go ahead, Bo.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. And yeah, this kind of really goes back to what we were talking about, where again, when we said, hey, this seems very daunting, a lot of moving stuff, and then we present this map, and again, it doesn't really give any confidence. But we've seen this ran with multiple customers of variety of verticals, and it's actually a model that has worked well and something that's actually been condensed. We work off sprint 0, and from there, the idea is doing a long range planning on, again, trying to get a high 30,000 foot overview of what is it that we're trying to target for each work stream, right? Whether it's migration, security, landing zone, what is it that we're trying to target? What are some obstacles that we're facing? What is something we're needing to get implemented before we hit that operational readiness? And it segues right into the start where, we're hitting the ground running. We're going over all things. We're going over strategy, design sessions of a variety of areas across, multi-account management, security, landing zone, things like that. Then from there, we're starting to go over those design decisions and just getting, working out where it is we need to get to a target state, getting those decisions baseline. And at the same time, this is where it really starts getting interchangeable, where we're deploying out new accounts, getting other decisions factored in as well. And then we're moving into design and implementation, going into Sprint 5, where we basically have our security model established, our landing zone established as well. And then from there, we're able to try to, move into Sprint 5, where we're getting an application into dev, again, going back to it, where we're locking all stakeholders in a room, getting everything prepared for our dev environment to get an application moved in there. And from there, there's a lot more of, confidence establishing where, essentially you're going through having game days as it relates to, security and operations as well. And then we segue into migrating our application waves. Christine, is there anything you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I would say that our activity plans were really based on feedback from working with customers. So Bo and I and our teammates have worked with lots of different customers, and in the field, like you hear us mentioning, people don't know where to start always. Customers will ask us, how do I get started? And so we like to reference the platform and migration activity plan because it does a really good job of painting the picture of how do we either establish or validate the platform and make sure it's ready for the incoming migrations. And then once we ensure that readiness is there, then, how do we move forward with either establishing a migration factory and maybe exercising that factory before we are really deep in the weeds with migration? So this was based on, field feedback and also experience working with customers. That's where this activity plan idea came from. And the only other thing I'll add, Bo, is that within the activity plan, sure, there's lots of different colored squares. These all actually relate to artifacts in the set of delivery kits. So Bo's going to talk more deeply about some of those artifacts now.
Yes, that's a great segue, Christine. And yeah, one of the big things is, and as we see this we talked about landing zone, and this is the delivery kit for that particular area. And here you can see a lot of artifacts as it relates to that work stream, where we talk about, that account design. We're talking about an organization structure, how business units are defined. And it's really establishing landing zone control tower, and then building the network on top of it. That's where we established that WAN model. Identifying where are we talking to our on-prem data center or data centers, trying to establish resiliency, and at the same time adapt a network model that allows us to migrate data from our data centers over to AWS. Establishing DNS connectivity, how that works out exactly, and even drilling down into like local area networks too within AWS as we talk about individual environments. Going over there, we're also talking about software development lifecycle models, as well as it relates to managing infrastructure resources. And so as we look at these delivery kits, if you don't mind, Christine, scrolling at the top of this artifact, one of the things I like to point out is the lifecycle management. And the idea is that you want to get essentially follow this model where you have those discussions, you're able to document the discussion points and identify what exactly it is that we're looking for as it relates to these individual artifacts. So as we talk about VPC subnet design, where we're talking about getting our address space figured out, you want to be able to get all the necessary stakeholders in the room, app owners, network engineers, classifying all our sitter blocks for each respective environment while accounting for growth. That way, when everybody's reviewed this, you can baseline it. That way, if somebody adds a /16 to an environment, we can then go back and review that and be like, okay, hey, this wasn't supposed to be added. But it essentially is at the same time allows you to make sure everything from a design perspective is done to where we talk about those one-way, two-way door decisions. Something like your sitter classifications, you can't really back out of that if you start having applications existing in your environment. It's one of those decisions you really need to go over. So that's just the landing zone delivery kit, how to high overview. If you don't mind, Christine, I think this allows us to segue really into the delivery kit space for security. For security as well, it's definitely a wide area that it targets. Here we go over the 5 pillars of security as it relates to identity access management, logging and monitoring, infrastructure security, data protection, as well as incident response. And again, it's one of those delivery kits that contains really a lot of artifacts, but at the same time, again, we've operated this work stream over a particular period of time, and it's amazing the amount of decisions you're able to go through while going over this. You're establishing areas like centralized logging, trying to understand your SIM, as well as establishing infrastructure protection, as well as relates to your LAN and WAN models, the whole gamut. How are we handling multi-account authentication as well into our AWS environments? How this works with Active Directory? You're really going over a wide variety of areas within the security space. And again, one of the things I just want to highlight again is like this landing zone delivery kit, and really all of our delivery kits, is that you do have that life cycle mechanism where you again establish your decision criteria, get the necessary people to review in terms of the necessary stakeholders, and then you reach that baseline where you can then feel confident in starting to design your artifacts, your scripts to essentially build out that the outcome from these artifacts. Anything you want to add, Christine?
No, I think that's a great segue into the decision catalog. Like Bo mentioned, whether it's that decision he talked about around CIDR blocks, or maybe it's other key critical decisions throughout the life of the project, we know that it takes hundreds of decisions to make a move to the cloud. And as we've been working with customers over the years, tracking decisions and giving visibility and transparency to decisions has been one of the key areas. We had a gap here back in the day where this was a really big challenge for most of our customers, and it ends up becoming a blocker if we don't have decisions properly documented and tracked throughout the life of a project. So what we decided to do is really quite a simple idea. So if we think back to those books on lean product development, we said, hey, let's just use a tool that we already are using and go ahead and create ourselves a mechanism to manage decisions. So you can see I'm here in Jira. Nothing special about this Jira instance, except we're using a Kanban board. So for those that aren't familiar, a Kanban board basically means the cards aren't going to disappear week to week like a sprint board. So they're persistent. And with this persistent set of cards on my board, I can do some work on a weekly sprint with my team members and say, okay, let's go ahead and come up with our multi-account user authentication policy. Let's document that out in our knowledge base, whether it's Confluence or some other knowledge base our team is using. We would go ahead as a team, come up with that recommended decision, go ahead and link this card to that documentation in Confluence. Confluence is one of the most popular knowledge bases that we've seen used and that we use. And so we'd link that card. And then as we're getting ready to finish out our sprint, we'd go ahead and we'd move that card into under review. The only people on the team that can move a card from under review to approved are our decision makers. And so at different customers, this looks different. Sometimes it may be a CIO, or sometimes it's a combination. Maybe it's VP of operations plus a CISO. Again, it depends on the work stream and the organization about who is the decision maker. But with Jira, you can use role-based access control to say that you only want those decision makers to be the only people that can move a card from under review to approved. So on a weekly basis, we review with our decision makers. They take a look at the ticket. They decide whether or not they approve it. If you're familiar with Jira, you know that folks can go ahead and make comments within a card itself. So maybe they're not certain about everything you've documented, or maybe they have a question before they want to move to approved. All of that chatter can happen within the ticket itself, which is awesome. So if you're ever wondering, why did we make that decision? Or was it a one-way or two-way door decision? Let me just go back to the ticket and check it out. Speaking of one-way and two-way door decisions, we have a reopened column, you'll notice. And really, this is to help us facilitate two-way door decisions. If there's something we're just doing a limited time experiment with, and we know we're going to come back and revisit the decision, we'll move that to the reopened column. We'll do our experiment, and then once we're happy with the new solution or new recommended decision, we can follow the same path, promote that card into under review, and seek approval from our leadership. Now, you may think, well, geez, that sounds formal. That sounds like a lot. If you build this into your typical sprint cycle or your sprint cadence of events, it really is no additional work on the team. The team's already doing the work in Confluence to document their design decisions. All this is doing is providing transparency to leadership, and also that other way, transparency to the team, so they know what decisions have been made or signed off on. And then leadership can come in and see the actual decision recommendation from the team. And if they want to, they can dive deeper in the Confluence documentation. This has been a key mechanism for us when we talk about, the mechanisms and how we innovate. This is a key one that has been really successful for us with our customers. Even so much successful that, again, this is another cloud agnostic one where we go back and we revisit with customers, and it turns out that some customers end up using the decision catalog for other IT decisions that they're making because they're such a big fan of this idea. All righty, excellent. Let me flip back over to our slides here, and Bo is going to talk about another key mechanism called Video Library.
Yeah, absolutely. So during the mobilize phase, there's a lot of discussions, working sessions where you're going through design and implementation decisions, and a lot of times what happens is that there are necessary stakeholders that are needed for whether it's security tasks that are going on, networking related, and a lot of times these stakeholders have meeting conflicts. Somebody's out sick. There's just things that always go on that people just have no control over. And a lot of times with some of these customer journeys, Christine, you can attest to this as well. We're operating under tight deadlines. We need to get out of this data center by X date. We can't extend beyond that. And so a lot of these sessions can't be delayed, and these stakeholders need to be involved. And that's where the video library comes in. The habit to get into is recording these sessions to where, as you mentioned, Christine, with the decision catalog, is you can go back and review, what was said, what was decided upon. And that way, those stakeholders that have missed those meetings, they can go ahead, review that, and understand what was said. They can add in their input, and still we don't miss a beat in terms of the respective accelerator that we're on. One thing I'll kind of point in and how Video Library has also helped as well. It's helped with organizations, particularly larger enterprises, from a marketing standpoint. This has spawned off other business units within organizations to where organizations were able to share out these videos. Hey, this is what we're doing, and they've been able to spawn off their own mobilize phases, if you will, when it comes to building out their own landing zone implementation as well, and integrating security and operations as well. So it's something that has what you would think is little impact, but can actually have a big impact as it relates to the mobilize phase. And another thing, as we start talking about, going back to the platform migration accelerator map, is when we talked about sprint zero, and that's really identifying, again, the objectives that we're trying to accomplish here. Well, one of those things that also needs to be mentioned too is, well, who's leading on security, who's leading on landing zone, these respective work streams. That's very critical in itself as well, because as a project manager, you're managing a lot of separate multiple threads that are going on during this journey, if you will. And you need to identify the work stream members that are involved that will be doing the data collecting, putting it into the technical artifacts that you saw in our delivery kits, and reaching a quorum as it relates to, hey, these are design decisions. And again, the lead is the one that is driving the discussion points as well to reach our end goals. Anything you want to add here, Christine, on this slide?
The only thing I'll say is really to echo your points, Bo, is the single-threaded leadership is key. And in addition to single-threaded leadership, we really want to find folks that are champions and can almost act like training the trainer. So folks that are involved in the mobilize phase are going to be the ones who establish your platform. All that good stuff that Bo was talking about around landing zone and security. When you identify your team that's going to be doing that, maybe have a think about who are some of the champions in your organization that will, learn how to build that landing zone security and operations model. And while they're learning, they're also, the type of folks that would want to train others and bring others along for the journey. Those internal champions, it's good to think about including them in your team. Alrighty. So agile and weekly sprints. We've talked about two pizza teams. We've talked about a whole bunch of mechanisms. And you may be thinking, well, that's great. What does it actually look like to do this in a week? What does a sprint look like? We recommend, and we ourselves actually on our own teams, Bo and I are on a team together, we use 1 week sprints, and we always start and stop our sprints midweek because it's best practice and it just ends up working. So when we're coming up with a sprint during Mobilize, we're going to exercise typical sprint cadence like a daily stand-up. We're going to replenish our sprint. We're also going to have demo every week to share what we've accomplished and get buy-in from stakeholders. And then we're going to throw something else in the mix. We're going to do a weekly meeting with our CIO and CISO, that shared team of decision makers. And every week we're going to bring them the decision catalog as well as any risks and blockers. We want to make sure that we have a good line of communication with those executive sponsors. Back to that slide of 4 bullets that I shared that talked about essential success criteria. Actually, having that executive sponsor engaged and aligned is important, but maintaining that relationship with that person or that group of people is really critical. So making them a part of your sprint cadence and having that weekly decision review is an awesome way to do that. And then when it comes to the actual migration, maintain that meeting. I know when I've run mass migrations myself, I maintain that weekly meeting with the CIO. It's a perfect opportunity for me to say, hey, here's how much stuff we've migrated. By the way, we're stuck. We're blocked in these areas, and you, Mr. or Mrs. CIO, you can help unblock me by, helping with these things. And it really is a powerful mechanism and tool. You're probably looking at this slide and wondering, what are all these 1-hour working sessions? It looks pretty weird. So you can look at that time as your working time. So in this sample schedule, we're, focusing our sprint on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and we're leaving Monday and Friday empty because we know that we're working with team members that are running production systems. They need time to do their other work, but we all know ourselves, right? Humans need time to focus in order to get a job done. And so we're saying, why don't we focus on Mobilize and prepping our cloud environment on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? And these 1-hour work blocks are designed to focus on the topics. So Bo shared that really nice diagram of, platform and migration and what happens every sprint. All these 1-hour slots are focused on those colored boxes and those topics that he shared, whether it's WAN design or IAM roles, whatever it is. Just take a 1-hour block and dedicate it to those topics. This has really worked for us in working with customers and even among ourselves as a great way to tackle how to handle a sprint. Alrighty, switching gears kind of back to, agile and other mechanisms that you can bring into the way that you work. This is similar to the decision catalog board. For customers that have, specific security compliance regimes that they have to meet, in the past, we've created small agile teams focused on these, compliance controls that have to be met. What does this mean? It means that we take the security control and we turn each security control into a ticket in Jira. We throw together a Kanban board and we assign some owners. Maybe it's information security officers, basically those folks on your team that can help write the justifications for these controls. Within the ticket itself, that's where we'll put the justification, whether it's screenshots or a write-up for each control. And we move through it in a sprint fashion. So each person will pick a few tickets or a few controls per sprint. They'll go ahead, add the justification, and move it to done. Working in this way has allowed us to move through things like authority to operate and other security compliance exercises in a relatively quick manner, and also in a way that is documented. So if an auditor ever came along and needed to check things, well, every control is documented in a ticket. So we can go to that control, to that ticket, and see the justification that was made for it. So again, this is just the idea of taking those books that we shared several slides back and using those ideas for lean product development and those agile mechanisms and applying them to what we're doing in everyday life.
So one of the most important concepts I really want to drive home is really is persistent chat and no email. Christine, you probably have your own war stories as it relates to this topic as well, but it's the ability to keep communication centralized. So as you're working with multiple teams, you want to establish a medium in which all parties are essentially communicating with each other, or at the very least, an actual individual work stream. Like let's say security or landing zone or the migration team. You want to be able to keep all chatter to that chat room so that all stakeholders are involved. I've seen some instances during these customer journeys where email threads start popping up and people weren't included, and then design decisions are delayed, and then there was a miscommunication. And then when that happens, as we have the train, kind of the proverbial train going on the rails going a little bit, it can sometimes take things off track. And especially if you're working under tight deadlines, it adds to unnecessary stress. So I really like this slide because it may seem like a simple concept, but it has a really significant impact as it relates to the success of the journey that customers are going on. And it is a journey with a lot of moving parts, and you want to make sure those parts are moving in conjunction with one another, and that these email threads don't spawn up, if you will. I almost kind of consider, if you will, email threads as the proverbial weeds in a garden. Christine, again, you've done these journeys just like I have. Is there anything you really want to add, as well as like some of your own anecdotes that you've seen?
Yes. Thanks for asking. I would say the no email best practice also just reinforces this idea of a knowledge base. So we showed you the delivery kits earlier, and that's great. You may choose to leverage delivery kits, from AWS, or you may have your own knowledge-based solution you're using with your team. And email is the antithesis of the knowledge base in my mind, because threads get lost and information's not shared with everybody that is needed. And so if you make a no email rule with your team, it reinforces the idea of using the knowledge base to codify knowledge, to get information out of people's minds. Here at Amazon, we call it tribal knowledge, right? We've all got this information in our heads. And if I'm out sick, someone should be able to go to the knowledge base and see the run book for the system that I have to operate. No one should have to be relying on combing through emails to see what has to happen with my system for operating. So again, yeah, just to reiterate your story here, Bo, couldn't agree more. This really applies, and it's a good life rule. All righty. Let's see. I think we're coming to the end of our time here. So I know I've really enjoyed sharing with everybody today. I don't know, Bo, if you have any closing thoughts, but I'll just say thank you all for your time. And Bo and I have shared some links here that if you want to pursue further or learn more, we have some information out there. Any closing thoughts, Bo?
No, I was definitely glad to give this talk to everyone. I hope everyone found this presentation that you and I delivered, Christine, very helpful. And again, it may seem daunting, but once you hit the ground running, everything comes together. So thank you.